Dust drew a straight seam between earth and sky, unbroken except for the widow's wagon. 2 patient mules hauled it, hooves thudding like small, steady drums. A single trunk rattled in the bed, tools, blankets, and the silence that had lived with her since the pneumonia took Eli 2 winters before. No ribbon fluttered from the reins. No charm hung at the yoke. Only the widow and the wind. She had driven 12 miles to Bluff Crossing for seed and lamp oil. Instead, she found the auction pen behind the livery, half hidden by leaning fence slats. 3 girls stood on the splintered plank, small, smaller, smallest, each draped in gunny sacks cinched around their throats, burlap hoods pressed flat by noon glare, ankles shackled, bare feet on hot boards, black skin visible only at wrists and calves, dull from road dust and neglect. The trader barked lot numbers, voice brittle from cheap whiskey. A gambling crowd shifted, curious but cautious. The slave patrol rode south last month, yet fear lingered. No one wanted federal trouble. The girls brought few bids. Sour stock, the trader scoffed, lifting a hood edge to show a bruised cheek. The crowd turned away. Even cruelty had quotas. The widow watched from the wagon's shadow. She counted the ribs of the smallest girl by the rise of the sackcloth, then counted her own coins. $15, the sum she had saved for winter stove repairs. Her pulse did not race. Grief had taught her stillness. She stepped forward, placed the entire purse on the crate the trader used for a desk. He frowned, weighed silver, spat, then nodded. A gavel strike echoed against corral posts. Deal done. No applause, no outrage. The crowd dissolved, eager to forget what sunshine had revealed. The trader unlocked chains with a rusted key, muttering about lost margins. The eldest girl rubbed her wrists but kept head bowed. The widow guided them to the wagon, lifted each bundle of bone and fear onto quilt-lined boards. She offered water. They drank in small swallows, eyes fixed on her hands, not her face. The road home cut through greasewood flats, humming with cicadas. Afternoon heat shivered. The widow drove in silence, pausing only once at a dry creek bed to water mules. The girls remained motionless. Burlap scratched their shoulders when the wagon lurched. Flies gathered. She kept reins light, as if gentleness might leak through timber and cloth. Dusk reached for the prairie. Shadows slipped long across the furrows Eli once plowed. The house waited. 2 rooms, cedar shingles gray as ash, a pump that sighed, but still gave clear water. She halted the wagon by the porch, set brake, climbed down. One by one she lifted the girls to ground. Their knees quivered yet held. Inside, kerosene lamplight softened cracked plaster. The widow unknotted the smallest at first. Coils of tight black hair fell, matted by dust. Wide eyes met hers, startled but unblinking. She unfastened the other hoods. 3 faces emerged. Hollow cheeks, dry lips, ember sparks of suspicion. No tears. She pointed to a wooden bench near the hearth. They sat. She ladled broth, beans, salt pork, onion, into tin bowls. Steam rose, carrying rosemary she had dried last fall. The eldest girl steadied the youngest hands around the bowl, as if ceremony mattered even now. They ate cautious, but did not leave a drop. Night deepened. Crickets clicked in the cottonwoods. The widow filled a basin with pumped water warmed on the stove, set on the floor, placed a clean rag beside. She stepped back. The eldest girl understood, dipping rag, wiping the youngest face, arms, swollen ankles. Burlap sacks slipped to the plank floor, forgotten husks. Under grime their skin glowed coal dark against lamplight, a quiet marvel of life that refused to dull. Beds were few. The widow unrolled 2 quilts on her own pine mattress, stretched a third across the foot. She motioned, "Sleep here." She carried a chair to the doorway, settled there, back straight, shotgun resting but unfired across her lap. Protection, not threat. The girls curled together, exhaustion heavier than fear. Soon breathing evened, syncopated by small coughs. Past midnight, the youngest stirred. Tiny feet padded toward the chair. The widow opened one eye. Moonlight slanted through the window, silvering the child's face. A whisper rose, hoarse, almost broken, "Martha?" The widow's given name floated into the dark, fragile as glass. Her throat tightened. She answered only by opening the blanket draped over her shoulders. The child climbed onto her lap, bones light but heartbeat strong. The widow wrapped quilt around them both. In that cradle of lamplight and moonbeam, name and need braided into something new, an unasked vow. Outside, wind shifted, carrying scent of rain from distant buttes. Inside, for breath aligned. The widow, no longer entirely alone, watched the lamp flame steady itself against draft and waited for morning. The stove ticked as it cooled. Somewhere farther down the prairie, lawmen or raiders might ride. Here, in a cedar-framed hush, dawn would find 3 sacks discarded, 3 girls unchained, and a name reclaimed to bind them all. First light found the widow still in the chair, the small girl sleeping against her shoulder, quilt puddled like quiet dawn between them. A red-band woodpecker hammered the porch post, its drumming loud in the hush. The widow eased the child onto the mattress beside her sisters, rose, and stoked the stove to coax pale flames from last night's ash. Water hissed, bread warmed, a single slice of salt pork crackled in the pan. The eldest girl woke first, wary but unstartled, as if her sleep had kept one eye open. She helped the others sit, smoothing their hair with deliberate care. The widow slid plates across the table, cornbread, sliced apples from the last crate Eli had harvested, a humble feast compared to auction scraps. They ate in silence until crumbs vanished. Outside, clouds moved like a slow herd, promising late-season rain. The widow untied canvas aprons from a peg, offered one to each child. The middle girl, taller than the smallest by a handspan, accepted with a shy nod. Work began. The widow showed how to pull ragweed from onion rows, where to pile damp straw for compost, how to tip water barrels slowly so seedlings bent, not broke. The youngest knelt in mud, hands patting earth around struggling beans, as though reassuring them dawn would return. By noon, sun sparks pierced clouds. Sweat carved paths through soil dust on 3 small faces, but no complaint rose. The eldest girl straightened to rest her back. The widow offered a tin dipper of water. When the girl passed it carefully to the others before drinking herself, something inside the widow softened, a stitch taken in a wound that had sat open too long. They broke for meal of cold beans and molasses. The widow watched how each girl folded scrap-cloth napkins after, stacking them square. Manners taught by someone whose face likely faded in their memories, yet the lesson remained. She touched her wedding ring, still worn though Eli lay beneath cottonwood roots, and felt a kinship with ghosts raising children through habits. Mid-afternoon, clouds thickened, rain sent quickening air. The widow showed the girls how to latch shutters tight, how to bank coals so cooking heat would last, but sparks not escape. Lightning sketched white across distant hills. Thunder followed, muffled. The youngest flinched, but the eldest placed a steadying palm on her shoulder. The widow lit a kerosene lamp though daylight lingered, a gesture that meant storm could darken nothing they refused to surrender. Rain finally burst, drumming shingles, racing down pump troughs. Inside, lamp glow painted honey across log walls. The widow opened Eli's tool trunk for sewing kit. Dresses torn during auction needed mending. She laid thread, bone needles, faded cloth remnants. The middle girl's gaze lingered on a violet square, color rare in her world. The widow handed it over. The girl pressed fabric to cheek, eyes bright but dry. They sewed. The widow's stitches marched straight. The girls wandered yet held. Between needle dips she caught fragments of story in their posture. Shoulders too disciplined. Fingers callous in places no child's ought to be. She stitched slower, making room for silence to breathe. Storm eased near dusk. A rainbow arched behind cottonwoods, fleeting in hard light. The youngest squealed, a soft sound like a bird lost and found, and darted the window. The widow followed, kneeling so the child could see color spill across wet field stubble. Hope suspended briefly, then fading into gray. The child's breath fogged glass. She traced the arc with fingertip, sealing it inside. Night approached from the valley. The widow cooked rabbit stew, sent filling rafters. Before serving, she cut 4 slivers of cornbread, set them on a saucer, and carried it to Eli's grave beneath the cottonwood. Old habit, an offering. The girls watched from porch. The eldest stepped down, gathered 3 weeds with tiny white blooms, and placed beside the saucer. No words. The gesture braided past the present without tugging too hard. Back inside, stew warm stomachs, ease muscles. The widow set paper and charcoal on the table. She wrote her name in careful block letters. Martha. She pointed to herself, then slid charcoal to the eldest. Fear flickered, but resolve steadied. She wrote hesitant lines. Lucy. She nudged charcoal to middle girl. Ruth. To the youngest. Ella. For names breathed in lamplight, like seedlings given soil. Martha repeated each aloud, voice husky from disuse. Then beneath wrote family. She was not certain what future promised, but the word fit the room's shape. Lightning far off again, smaller storm or restless ghost. Martha barred door, lifted shotgun to mantle, not to threaten but remind wolves, 4-legged or mounted, that cedar walls would not yield easily. She settled the girls into bed, quilts now patched with violet and burlap squares alike. She dragged a chair near doorway as last night, but Lucy rose, fetched a second blanket, draped it around Martha's shoulders. Simple kindness traveled both directions now. When candle dimmed, Ella slid from mattress, patted to Martha. Instead of asking for embrace, she placed Martha's palm over her own heart, a beat swift yet steady. Then she laid her small hand over Martha's chest, her widow heart answering slower but surer. 2 rhythms met, 2 storms quieted. Outside, coyotes howled greeting to the washed moon. Inside, log walls absorbed breath of 4 lives knitting. Rain water in barrels would serve crops. Stitched dresses with warm skin. Spoken names would anchor souls. Sleep settled, thin at first, then deeper, like roots testing earth after transplant. Morning would rise on weeds yet to pull, meals yet to cook, dangers yet to weigh. But night had finished its ledger. Fear struck through, trust, penciled in, family, underlined once. Morning spread thin gold on the wet fields, mist lifting off furrows like slow breath. Martha rose before the rooster's hesitant crow, stepping outside to taste the air. Rain-washed, cedar-sharp, carrying quiet she had not felt since Eli's laughter lived here. She pumped water into a dented tin pail, listening to the creek echo toward barn timbers that still wore storm damp. Inside, 3 small figures slept knotted in quilts patched with violet and burlap, but soon footfalls padded soft across floorboards, Lucy first, then Ruth, Ella trailing, clutching the violet scrap as if it might vanish. They shared skillet cornbread and thick coffee, sweetened with a single spoon of molasses. Martha sliced portions equal, setting her own smallest. Ella pushed a crumb back onto Martha's plate. Balance mattered. They ate without talk, but the hush had changed. Not vacancy anymore. Expectation, like soil waiting seed. The day's labor began at the coop. Chickens had scattered during rain. Ruth coaxed them with grain, her hum low, measured, a song perhaps remembered from before wagons and chains. Lucy patched gaps in the wire with lengths of baling twine. Martha watched the girl's fingers, deft, practical, wondering what chores they had been forced to learn too early. Ella lugged a bucket half her weight, splashing water across dusty feathers. The birds settled, clucking approval. Next they turned to the north field where thistles crowded onions. Martha handed Lucy the hoe, showed how to angle blades shallow so roots released whole. The girl mimicked once, twice, then settled into rhythm. Ruth knelt to gather weeds and burlap, nodding the sack like she meant to carry burden far from sight. Ella chased grasshoppers between rose shadows, dropping each into the weed sack, a silent triumph widening her grin. By noon sun baked puddles to cracked ribbons. Martha led them to the creek skirting cottonwoods. Clear water slid over pebble beds, cool enough to numb worries. She knelt, rolled sleeves, and washed soil from her arms. The girls followed, shoes abandoned on the bank. Lucy dipped bandana, wiped Ruth's face clean, then Ella's, then finally her own. When they finished, Martha unfolded a small mirror, the only trinket she kept from her bridal chest, and let each child see her reflection. Their expressions shifted, recognition mixed with hesitation, as though the glass revealed not just faces but possibility. On the hike back, a distant dust plume lifted beyond the ridge. Martha tracked it until sun glare swallowed detail. Maybe ranch drovers, maybe worse. Memory of burlap hoods tightened her chest. At the cabin, she stored the shotgun within arm's reach of doorpost, then busied the girls with shelling beans. The rhythmic tap of kernels against tin of camouflage for unease. The riders arrived near dusk. 3 men in worn cavalry coats, badges tarnished, eyes sharp from long miles. They dismounted at the gate, studied the fields, the smoke curling from chimney, the small shapes visible through window glow. Their leader tipped hat, called for the owner. Martha stepped onto porch. Shotgun stayed, but visible. He produced folded documents, recovery warrants for absconded chattel, age estimated 8 to 12, race colored. His voice held careful politeness, like steel wrapped in velvet. Martha met his gaze, neither yielding nor daring to lie outright. She asked for signatures. He obliged. The names were scribbles from some Eastern clerk who never breathed prairie dust. She stated calm that no such property resided here. The deputy's eyes narrowed, drifting to quilts hanging on a line. One quilt fluttered, violet scrap bright against dusk. He dismounted, boot crunching gravel. Inside, Lucy herded Ruth and Ella to the pantry's dark corner, pressing burlap sack of bean shells against their chests to hide pounding hearts. Through the crack they watched silhouettes. Martha rigid, deputy advancing. Ruth clutched Ella's hand. Lucy reached for the small knife kept by butter churn, fingers trembling but ready. Outside, the deputy paused at a headstone under cottonwood, reading Eli's carved name. His stance softened. Widows commanded some respect, even among slave catchers. He turned, noting fresh peach shoots, mended coop wire, the orderly rows no hireling could manage alone. Work here spoke of many hands. He asked to inspect barn for runaways. Martha declined, voice even, no warrant allowed search. She offered water instead, hospitality flaunted as boundary. The deputy weighed confrontation. Daylight dwindled, his men restless. Finally he tucked warrants away, muttered they would return with proper authority, and rode off, dust swallowing hooves. Martha exhaled only when silence settled. She leaned against porch rail, shotgun heavy now. Lucy slipped outside, knife still clutched. Martha knelt, folded Lucy's fingers from blade, replaced it with her own steady hand. No words, resolve passed skin to skin. Night stretched. They ate stew thickened with sorrow and relief. Then Martha unfurled map scraps Eli had sketched, back trails through juniper brakes, hideouts where antelope found shade. She traced possible escape lines, lantern glow flickering across callous palms. Lucy watched, nodding at each point, quick mind mapping refuge. Ruth fetched a stub of pencil, marking where creek bed stayed wet year-round. Ella slept, thumb tucked around violet cloth, trust anchoring her dreams. Before bed, Martha added a fourth line to the wall, where she recorded seasons. Storms test fences. Love mends boards before daylight shows the cracks. Lucy touched the charcoal, eyes reflecting flame. Then she spoke, voice raw from long silence. Miss Martha. 2 words, not whispered but placed carefully, like seeds pressed into moist soil. Martha's breath caught. She answered with embrace that pulled all 3 close. Quilt corners fluttered as if the house exhaled too. Wind shifted overnight. Coyotes yipped alarm then stilled, as though sensing boundaries newly claimed. In the darkness, Martha lay awake, listening to 3 steady breathing patterns across the room. Fear still rode the ridge. Rifles still sought stolen childhoods. But beneath cedar shingles a different ledger wrote itself. Coin spent, storms turned, names spoken, hearts counted. Morning would demand hard choices. Dig trenches, prepare mule, or stand ground. But dawn's first promise glimmered in every patch of violet sewn onto burlap quilts now hiding no one but sheltering everyone. Blue-gray dawn seeped between cedar boards, fainter than courage but growing. Martha rose with it, belt cinched, rifle cleaned, decision heavy as iron. Stay meant risk. Fleeing meant losing soil Eli once tilled. She drew breath that tasted of wood smoke and dusk beans, then stepped outside. Dew-silvered onions. Frost pledge lingered on porch rail. Behind, faint footfalls. Lucy already awake, kerchief hiding her plates. Ruth followed with bucket, Ella, half sleeping, clutched Violet's scrap against chest. 3 shadows ready before sun, cleared ridge. Martha spoke little. She pointed north where cottonwood trunks parted like gates. Creek trail, Lucy whispered back. Plan agreed. If deputies returned with warrants signed, the girls would vanish upriver, follow blue chalk marks Martha had struck last night on flat stones. She would stall search long as lungs allowed. Work filled the pause before worry could bloom. Ruth and Ella rolled quilts, packed salt pork, parched corn needle-kit into flour sack. Lucy ground coffee, stashing beans in a tin that once held nails. Martha tied everything to the mule's pack saddle. Not taut yet quick release, in case flight demanded speed. Mid-morning hose broke horizon, dust plume smaller. 2 riders only, but uniforms crisp, papers neat, authority polished since first visit. Martha's pulse steadied. She wiped clay from hands, leaned shovel by garden gate. The girls slipped inside barn shadows, sacks ready. The deputies halted at fence. The younger read from embossed warrant. Right to search premises for fugitive property. Martha asked to see seal. Red wax mocked her thumbprint. She opened gate herself, inviting them toward coop first, stall tactic. They rummaged hay, counting chickens like tax men. Found nothing. She led them to tool shed, to water barrel. Each step feeding minutes to creek trail. Inside barn, Lucy tugged Ella's hand toward ladder loft. Ruth lingered, ear pressed to plank. Deputy voices rose, impatience. Barn door groaned. Boots thudded on packed dirt. Lucy hissed, pushing sisters behind straw bales, hearts drumming. The mule snorted, betraying scent of fear. Leather creaked as deputies circled stall. Ella's elbow brushed shovel, metal clinked, loud as church bell. Boots paused. The elder deputy called out. Silence answered. He stepped toward ladder, pistol half drawn. Above him, Lucy clutched pitchfork, trembling between strike and freeze. Outside, Martha sensed shift. Wind carried echo of danger. She stepped inside, voice calm. You'll find tools, sir, not thieves. He spun, pistol raised. Martha's shotgun already leveled, deadlock. Dust motes drifted between barrels. A breath, then another. Ruth slid from straw, hands lifted, eyes steady. My name is Ruth, she said, voice thin yet unbroken. Deputy startled. Property not meant to speak. Lucy stepped forward, lowering pitchfork. I am Lucy. Ella followed, violet scrap in fist. Ella. Names floated, fragile banners. The elder deputy's pistol wavered. Trained law met children's assurance and faltered. Orders faded under weight of humanity. Behind, younger deputies swallowed hard, gaze on burlap quilts folded as packs. He holstered weapon first. Senior followed slower, throat working. Outside, wind stirred again, carrying scent of peach buds. Martha lowered shotgun. Deputies back towards sunlight. Warrant slackened grip. At gate they remounted. Elder spoke gruff. Paperwork would be returned stamped, unexecutable. Transport costs exceeded bounty. Hooves turned south. Dust closing over authority, undone not by bullets, but by names. Relief bent Martha's knees. She rested forehead on fence rail. Would cool against sweat. Barn door opened. Lucy led sisters out, shoulders straighter. Plan to flee dissolved, creek stones unneeded. That afternoon clouds piled high, promising rain and perhaps more tests. But peace for now. Martha unhitched mule, unpacked rations. Girls helped, laughter twitching at edge of lips. Sound not quite born. Ruth fetched quilts back to house, folding with new care. Lucy cleaned coop wire. Ella planted violet scrap beside peach chute. Tiny grave for fear, she said without words. Evening painted fields copper. Martha cooked rabbit with wild sage. They ate slowly, tasting quiet victory. After, Martha fetched charcoal and wrote on wall beneath last line. Name spoken turned warrants into paper ash. Lucy, hand still smelling of straw, added smaller line. Voice is the only key we kept hidden. Night deepened. Coyotes yipped far but respectful. Martha set extra cups on shelf, space waiting for songs yet unsung. Sleep came lighter, sweetened by first laughter that rose when Ella dreamed aloud, calling Martha Ma between breaths. Beyond Cottonwood's moon climbed, bright enough to silver every onion leaf the deputies had trampled. The farm breathed, defended now by something fiercer than metal. 3 girls who owned their names and a widow who chose to carry them through every corridor of dawn. Spring breached the prairie in slow waves. First creek ice cracking into moving mirrors, then pale blades of rye rising through last year's straw. On these small signals, the widow and her 3 charges built a rhythm that felt less like refuge and more like home. Before dawn, Martha took census of the sky. Cloud shapes, wind scent, the distant hush that meant cattle drives shifting. Lucy rose with her, fetching water, testing the pump's groan as though gauging the farm's pulse. Ruth tended onions, laying fresh straw skirts around seedlings. Ella, barefoot, checked peach buds for worms, singing the half-melody she coaxed from Ruth's hum one dusk earlier. The notes wavered, uncertain, yet carried farther each morning. They mended fence rails shattered by winter buckling. Martha drove cedar stakes, but found her swing steadier because Lucy knotted wire exactly where tension begged. Ruth balanced between rails, hammered staples with the focus of a surveyor. Ella followed, pressing a fingertip to each joint as if blessing wood and iron. With every clink, the line around their land grew less like a wall, more like a stitched hem pulling fabric into shape. News rode in on wagon wheels. Selwyn Tate, circuit judge, stopped for water, eyes catching on the 3 girls' quick work. Word of the failed warrant had already reached his docket. At supper, rabbit stew, biscuits, new honey, Martha's voice would have tugged her waking thoughts. Legal guardianship. Tate unfolded parchment, asked names, ages guessed, any marks that might identify. Lucy spoke theirs with calm cadence. Ruth added birthdays from memory shards. Ella traced a violet patch quilt square, calling it her mark. The judge smiled, inked notes, promise papers on next circuit. 3 weeks later, he returned with documents bearing fresh territory seal. Adoption finalized. Surnames assigned. Lucy, Ruth, and Ella Graves. Martha signed beneath, hand steady, ring glinting. The girls pressed thumbs into warm wax, sealing future in red. Paper crackled like small thunder, then lay flat, ready to be filed in county ledgers, and more importantly, in their hearts. Summer leaned in hot and bright. The peach tree flowered pink, promising fruit. Bees whirred above white onion blooms. The girls discovered laughter larger than whispers. Lucy's rang low, surprising. Ruth's trilled. Ella's bursted like creek spray. Martha, hearing, found her own chuckle again, rusted but serviceable. Yet the prairie never forgives complacency. August dusk carried a wall of black cloud, wind clawing with dust claws. A funnel roared to life on the west horizon, grinding fences to straw. Martha herded the girls to root cellar, lantern flame jittering like panic. They curled under quilts, listening to wind lift boards, to nails protesting. In dark, Lucy reached for Martha's hand. Ruth wrapped arms around Ella, the violet scrap pressed between palms like a talisman. Above, shingles tore, glass shattered, but the cellar timbers, Eli's last carpentry, held. Morning showed wounds. Roof peeled like bark. Chicken coop splayed open. Half the peach tree snapped. Yet the house stood. They stepped into ruin, as into a task list. Martha fetched hammer. Ruth carried nails. Lucy reshingled in rhythm. Ella gathered fallen peaches, some bruised, most salvageable. Nothing sweet comes painless. 2 neighbors arrived with spare lumber, drawn by storm's rumor, and gratitude owed Martha for earlier medicine shared. Together they raised rafters, sealing gaps before next cloud line. That night, candlelight flickered against fresh boards. Martha added a final line beneath the others on kitchen wall. Storms return, but we have learned the grammar of rebuilding. Lucy read aloud, voice clear. Ruth traced each word. Ella dipped charcoal and drew 3 small peaches at the margin, shading the bruises. Martha kissed their foreheads, a new habit. September harvest filled sacks. Grain threshed beneath bare feet, laughter threshed with it. They brought first peaches in a basket to Eli's grave, setting 3 halves on the stone, offering for the soil that fed their tree. Ella placed a violet scrap beside fruit. Gift turned memory, now free to rest. In town, The sheriff tipped hat when Martha, and the girls delivered barley to the mill. No deputy shadowed them. No warrant etched fear in dust. On Sunday the church invited them Negro Hymn Day. The girls sang softly from back pew, Ella's voice rising as high as stained glass dared. Heads turned, but no scorn followed, only wonder that grace could travel on such young lungs. Winter whispered first frost across stubble. The rebuilt roof shed sleet. Coop held strong. Peach preserves glowed amber on shelves. By lamplight Martha taught letters, crafting words from feed sack scraps. Hope, seed, courage. The girls stitched each onto quilt squares, sewing language into warmth. On solstice eve Martha woke to soft murmur. Stepping to the window, she saw Lucy, Ruth, and Ella outside, nightgowns glowing in moon wash. They stood hand in hand beneath the peach tree stump. From its split heart sprouted a dozen green shoots, defying frost, fed by roots that refused surrender. The girls sang, adjoined him now, voices woven. Martha listened, tears drying cool on cheeks, realizing the song had outgrown fear, just as shoots would outgrow stump. She opened the door, walked into cold, and stood beside them, for shadows lengthened, merging. Wind held its breath. The farm, once a monument of grief, exhaled new syllables. Lullaby, promise, tomorrow. Martha felt Eli's absence soften. Love had changed rooms but never left the house. Spring would come, storms again, perhaps riders with new papers, illnesses, drought. Yet the ledger carved into cedar would stay. Names claimed, fear crossed out, family underscored. In candles dim the charcoal lines glimmered like constellations guiding weary travelers home. Morning would show fields waiting, chores lining up, but first dawn would find 4 hearts asleep under one patched roof, dreaming not of flight or warrants, but peach blossoms so heavy they bent branches low, so low even the smallest hand could pluck sweetness without standing on tiptoe.